Bids on the site for the convention were solicited in late 2017 and were made public in the spring of 2018. Las Vegas later withdrew and decided to focus on the 2020 Republican National Convention, for which its bid was subsequently defeated by Charlotte. On June 20, 2018, the Democratic National Committee (DNC) announced 4 finalists for the convention site. Immediately following the announcement, the finalist city of Denver withdrew from consideration due to apparent scheduling conflicts. Democratic National Committee Chairman Tom Perez announced on March 11, 2019, that Milwaukee would host the convention. The selection of Milwaukee will make this the first Democratic National Convention to be hosted in the Midwestern United States since Chicago hosted the 1996 Democratic National Convention, and the first to be hosted in a Midwestern city other than Chicago since St. Louis hosted the 1916 Democratic National Convention. Fiserv Forum, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Pepsi Center, Denver, Colorado, withdrawn after finalist selection. Toyota Center, Houston, Texas. American Airlines Arena, Miami, Florida, with some meetings at the Miami Beach Convention Center, Miami Beach, Florida. With the exception of Milwaukee, each of the finalist cities was a past host of a Democratic convention. Denver hosted in both 1908 and 2008. Houston hosted in 1928. Miami Beach hosted in 1972. In addition, both Houston and Miami Beach have also previously hosted Republican National Conventions, with Houston hosting it once in 1992 and Miami Beach having hosted both the 1968 and 1972 RNCs. Atlanta, Georgia. Birmingham, Alabama. Las Vegas, Nevada, withdrew in order to focus on bid for 2020 RNC. Atlanta had previously hosted the 1988 convention. On June 24, it was announced that the convention had been downsized and would be held at Milwaukee's Wisconsin Center instead of its originally planned venue, Milwaukee's Fiserv Forum. The change of location will make this the first major party convention held in a convention center since the 1996 Republican National Convention, and the first Democratic convention to be held in such a venue since the 1984 Democratic National Convention. Before it was downsized, 50,000 people had been expected to attend the convention. 31 state delegations were to stay in 2,926 Milwaukee area hotel rooms and 26 delegations were to stay in 2,841 hotel rooms in Lake County and Rosemont, Illinois. Another 11,000 hotel rooms were to house volunteers, members of the media, donors, and other attendees. Milwaukee had been planning an extension of its streetcar line to be completed in advance of the convention. However, these plans faltered, and the expansion will not be completed in time for the convention. Organizers were originally planning to recruit 15,000 volunteers. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the convention has been delayed to August 17–20. The DNC authorized its convention planners on May 12 to research alternative methods for participants to cast votes, considering that the DNC may decide to hold the entire convention online. On June 24, it was announced that the convention was to be downsized. The venue was shifted from the Fiserv Forum to Wisconsin Center. Biden will still accept his nomination in Milwaukee, but instead of the entire convention being held there, it will now feature Milwaukee only as just a hub city for the major convention events. The convention plans consist of what the DNC says will be curated content from Milwaukee and other satellite cities, locations, and landmarks across the country. All official business will be conducted remotely. Organizers canceled official parties and events scheduled to be held in Milwaukee before and coinciding with the convention. The owner of the Milwaukee Bucks and the Fiserv Forum is threatening to sue the Democratic Party, which is refusing to pay the full rent on the abandoned venue. Joe Salmonese, former president of the Human Rights Campaign, was named convention CEO in March 2019. Congressman Benny Thompson will serve as the permanent chair of the convention. Programming will be overseen by Ricky Kirshner. When party officials concluded that the pandemic would make a traditional convention impossible, they decided to adopt a format that was dramatically different from past conventions. The event has been officially renamed, A Convention Across America. While the primary purpose of political conventions is, and always was, to decide who the nominees for president and vice president are to be, the secondary purpose was always that of socializing. Entertainment is also a major element of the event, which in the past has included a house band for the main venue, theater, culinary experiences, and large amounts of motivational speaking. Indeed, the convention experience for attendees at the venue itself is extremely different from that for the viewer at home. With live coverage of the event limited, outside of the three major news networks and C-SPAN, to the keynote and acceptance speeches, the challenge to the DNC is how to boost ratings while increasing the nominees' lead in opinion polls. With social distancing still paramount to ensure the safety of the tens of thousands of people who were due to attend the main venue in Milwaukee, will not be able to do so, alternative methods are planned for a series of satellite venues across the country. While the convention will be anchored in Milwaukee, the events will be held in a dozen or so satellite sites spread out across the nation. From there, the delegations will transmit their votes on the floor of the Wisconsin Center, where a representative will announce the votes to relevant officials at the chair in the main venue. Superdelegates are delegates to the convention who are automatically chosen by the party, rather than by the results of primaries and caucuses. While technically unpledged, many of them have informally pledged themselves to a predesignated front-runner in previous elections. The superdelegate system is controversial among Democrats, and supporters of both Clinton and Sanders have called for their removal in 2020. The Unity Reform Commission, created after the 2016 election, recommended that the number of 2020 superdelegates be drastically reduced. As of July 2018, the DNC plans to revoke voting rights for superdelegates on the first ballot. They will be able to affect the selection of the presidential and vice presidential nominees only if voting continues to another ballot, which has not happened since 1952 for the presidential nomination and 1956 for the vice presidential nomination. Politico reported on January 31, 2020, that a small group of DNC members has been discussing plans to weaken Bernie Sanders's campaign by changing the rules to allow superdelegates to vote on the first ballot, in what would be a reversal of the reforms made following the 2016 election. However, prominent former DNC members, including Donna Brazile and Don Fowler, argued against changing the rules again, and DNC Chair Perez denied the possibility of a rule change. The number of delegates allocated to each of the 50 states and Washington, D.C., are based on, among others, the proportion of votes each state gave to the Democratic candidate in the 2008, 2012, and 2016 presidential elections. A fixed number of pledged delegates are allocated to each of the 5 U.S. territories and Democrats abroad. The Democratic National Committee's 2020 selection rules state that any candidate who is no longer running loses the statewide delegates they have won, and those delegates are then reallocated to candidates still in the race. However, the interpretation of this rule in 2020 races might be different than the interpretation in past races. In previous elections, such as the 2008 presidential primary, candidates would suspend their candidacies rather than formally withdraw, allowing their already pledged delegates to attend the convention and pick up new ones along the way. They would then formally withdraw when it was too late to reallocate the delegations. Some controversy occurred in April 2020 when the New York State presidential primary was canceled over the COVID-19 pandemic. The New York State Board of Elections then canceled the Democratic primary, in part to protect public health, but citing a state law allowing cancellation of elections that are uncontested. The Sanders campaign stated that Sanders had not withdrawn and neither Sanders nor the DNC had requested the cancellation, and demanded that the DNC overturn the decision or disqualify New York's delegates. On April 28, Andrew Yang and several Yang delegates filed a federal lawsuit against the New York State Board of Elections over the same cancellation. Oral arguments were heard on May 4. On May 5, Judge Annalisa Torres of the Southern District of New York ruled that Governor Andrew Cuomo's decision to scrap the state's primary violated the First and 14th Amendment rights of presidential contenders who have ended their campaigns, and the Board of Elections issued a ruling requiring New York to hold its presidential primary in June, and to restore Senator Bernie Sanders, IVT, and other former presidential candidates to the ballot. In April, shortly after Sanders endorsed Biden, the two created a «unity task force» to draft a version of the party platform, Due to the virus, the method of drafting the platform changed radically. A page was set up in which testimony from the general public might be taken. The platform drafting committee chair is Keisha Lance Bottoms, mayor of Atlanta, Georgia. Public hearings were live-streamed on the DNCC's YouTube channel during the week of July 1 on the following topics. Monday, June 29 from 5 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Addressing the COVID-19 health crisis and building back better. Wednesday, July 1 from 5 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time. A Vision for a More Equitable Future. Thursday, July 2 from 5 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Restoring the Soul of America. The full platform drafting committee met on July 15 and July 27, where they will submit a finished product to be voted on via the Internet from August 1 to 15. The Biden-Sanders Platform Task Force issued its 110-page report on July 9. The table below reflects the presumed delegate count as per the 2020 Democratic primaries. As of January 2020, the following overall number of pledged delegates is subject to change, as possible penalty bonus delegates awarded for each state's scheduled election date and potential regional clustering may be altered. Candidates who have suspended their campaigns without having received any pledged or superdelegate endorsements, as well as those who've suspended their campaigns and subsequently lost their endorsements to other candidates, are not included in the table below. In an email, DNC Secretary Jason Ray wrote to delegates outlining the process for that year's convention, noting that the Planning Committee concluded that state delegations should not plan to travel to Milwaukee and official convention business will be conducted remotely. Delegates vote remotely using a system the Planning Committee crafted that allows them to cast their ballots via email, with unique identifiers for security. The DNC had plans to certify each delegate. The party said delegates will be able to fill out the forms electronically, with no need for a printer or physical copy, according to the letter. The ballot, which includes questions about platform planks and the party's nominees, will be emailed to their state's committee. Once a state party has all the ballots from their delegation, the state delegation's chair will submit a tally sheet to the secretary's office that formally records the number of votes cast on each item of convention business. The votes will be counted all at once on August 15, not as they come in. Voting will begin August 3 and will end August 15, when the state delegation chairs are asked to submit their final tallies to the DNC secretary. That means the party will know the tally of votes for its nominee before the 4-day convention formally kicks off on August 17. As to the traditional roll call of the states, it may be done remotely from each of the 57 states, territories, and other jurisdictions. A number of Republicans are expected to speak at the convention, including former Ohio Governor John Kasich.